Dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, good morning, bonjour, hola, good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Ken at 10. How are you today? If you just joined us for the first time, then welcome. Thanks very much for coming. We speak every day live from our offices in Southwest London. We're a Norbury estate agent based in SW16. Norbury's between Streatham and Croydon, because I always get asked, because no one knows where we are. We're a Zone 3 commuter area. We deal with sales, lettings, auctions, that sort of thing. And talk about the property market daily. How are you? The weather here in SW16 is actually quite phenomenal. It's a beautiful day. It's got some beautiful skies. You know, when that sky's got some nice kind of cloudy, fluffy bits going on, no grey, which is quite nice for autumn, really. It's a nice autumnal day, really beautiful. So, property, a couple of questions I'm going to come on to at the end of the show. One about interest rates, what's going to happen there, and two about portfolio size. Does size matter? We'll come on to that later. First of all, a few news headlines. The total value in Britain of homes in Britain has risen by 20%. That's 1.6 trillion in the last 5 years, according to Zoopla. And what's interesting also is, we talk about London being the poor relation of many of the other cities, but here's the truth. And let's get the banner up so you can have it and think about it while we're looking for this. London only accounts for 13% of the stock, but it's actually responsible for 25% of the value of UK housing stock. 25% concentrated just in London. No wonder London's such a phenomenal area when it comes to long-term investment. It may have its short-term blips, as it has done over COVID, but it's coming back very strong now, particularly in relation to buy-to-let. And we're going to talk about portfolio size afterwards, because one of the things about rental portfolios, a lot of people think, well, we'll have a foray into it and just have the one. And there are pros and cons to that strategy, and I'll come on to that in a little while. But as far as the property market's concerned, a few other headlines going on. One that caught my eye in Glasgow, Glaswegian landlords not shy in coming forward when it comes to milking the COP26 conference. Interesting to see this. This is an article in the Times. It says an investigation by the Times has found how the forthcoming COP26 has given Glaswegian landlords a chance to charge massive rents. Rates have soared above £100,000 for the 2-week summit as politicians, scientists and activists vie for accommodation. The Times found 20 properties on Airbnb. I'd love to know what they were prior to the COP26. I bet they're just a fraction. Which were £20,000 for the fortnight. £20,000, while the average nightly price for a rental on Airbnb during those 2 weeks is over £600 a night. That's a threefold increase on the same dates in the following 2 months. So it's tripled. Really interesting. Friends of the Earth Scotland said the lack of affordable housing meant the conference risked being the most exclusionary COP ever. Well, that's true, of course. You've got to be able to afford to get there if you want to take part in the discussion, I suppose. But these days with socials and things, you can still engage, can't you? The Times has an article on rough sleeping, and this is former Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick. Not that he did much during his time as Housing Secretary, in my view. He's told the Times that progress on ending rough sleeping is at risk of slipping away due to a lack of focus on the problem. I do think it's a massive problem and something we should get hold of better, because it's really sad to see people, especially at this time of year. You've got drug addiction, mental health, and the rest of it, all causing and amplifying the problem on top of COVID, poverty. I've said for a long time now, if you're in property, you're renting property, then your wealth has probably increased over the pandemic. If not, then your wealth has actually decreased probably, and massively so. And for some people, especially those at the very bottom, we don't seem to be supporting them enough. He says we can't let our progress on ending rough sleeping wane, and that commitment must be made across government. And interestingly, it goes on to talk about micropods, and this is an article in one of the papers this week. I think it's the Evening Standard, and it says the joint project between Haringey and house builder Hill, backed by funding from the GLA, will see 33 of the most vulnerable people housed in micropods. These are small homes that have been set up on a disused corner plot. Great idea. It's the first project delivering modular housing for people who have been rough sleeping, and we're so excited for it to be launched, he says. The first residents are set to arrive in the coming weeks. Be interesting to see how that goes, and I hope it's a standard that can be set across the UK to assist homeless people, genuinely homeless people, because they need our assistance more than ever. House prices and rents set to rise, say the Times, the Independent, the Mail, and it says there's an upward trend amid a striking imbalance between demand and supply. The Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, of course, they're the ones that come around and do the surveys for you and do the mortgage valuations. And they say analysis shows the number of newly agreed house sales fell for the third month in a row in September, with a net net balance of 15% of property professionals reporting a decline rather than an increase in the numbers of sales. The RICS poll saw 68% of surveyors report house prices rising rather than falling in September, while a net balance of 35% reported a fall in properties coming to the market. The survey saw 70% of surveyors voice a belief that prices will continue to grow over the next 12 months. In the lettings market, 62% reported an increase in the number of people looking for rental property in September, with a balance of 21% seeing a decline in new landlord instructions. This imbalance is expected to drive rents higher. Well, we've said this for some time. It's looking likely that there's going to be huge pressure, specifically and particularly on the rental side. Apart from that, two questions. Number one, is yours big enough? Portfolio size I'm referring to, of course. What else would it be? Well, this is an argument. If you start in property, I always say, if you've not done it before, the thing about property is it does tend to favour the brave. And so those that go for multiple portfolios, there is an argument that it's logical. For instance, if you buy one property and that property is, let's say, a single dwelling, and you're paying a mortgage on that property of £1,000 per calendar month, but your rental is £1,500, that's a good yield, strong position. But if your tenant doesn't pay, then you're stuck with a bill of £1,000 a month. How long can you afford that for? Whereas if you take that same scenario, imagine you now hold 4 properties and you have a same yield or similar yield on each, then of course, when the one person doesn't pay, the supplemental value of the other 3 becomes huge. And so you do find that landlords with a larger portfolio actually run a lower risk of default, causing them serious financial issue. So there is a good argument for building your portfolio in that way. There are other considerations. This is not financial advice, but of course, do you hold it individually where you can't set the interest rates that you pay on your loan off, or do you hold it in the company? And that depends on the size and what you're aiming to do. In retirement, many people will look at this as a supplement to their pensions, and it's a great thing to do. We have many pensioners that rely on our monthly rental payments. Love you all. You're great people to deal with, and it's a lovely market to be involved in. And people are always surprised when we say the rental now has gone up to X or Y, not least the capital values, which tend to go through the roof over time. And I've always said the big secret with property is time. It's a question of a lot of people that, I just time it dead right. If I can just call the market, I'll call it when it's at the bottom, call it when it's at the top. Forget all that, because I tell you now, you won't be able to do it because we can't. It's very, very difficult to predict when the market may fall. There are pressures, and now coming on to the second point I made, interest rates. Well, we've got inflationary pressures are coming through quite strong and hard now. And when inflation comes through, the Bank of England tend to try and control that inflation through the raising of the base rate by the Bank of England. And the base rate by the Bank of England is where many lenders rely on getting their money from. Not all, because there are friendly institutions such as the Nationwide, which rely on savers saving with them and use that money in order to loan out. But by the same token, they're businesses as well. So if they can charge more and still be competitive in the marketplace, then they probably will. So what do I think is going to happen with interest rates? I think within the next 6 months, we're going to see a rise, if not sooner. I think at the moment it's probably too soon, and the Chancellor will be looking at the situation quite carefully. And whilst he doesn't control interest rates, the Bank of England do, and the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England are the ones that make these decisions. They're no doubt in very close liaison with the government. And I think right now we're not going to see an interest rate imminently, but I do think a rise is coming in the not too distant future. And I've said for some time, it's not financial advice, but you should be thinking about fixing your rate if you're staying with your property for a while. Bear in mind a thing called redemption penalties, which means that generally speaking, during the period of your loan, if you then decide to sell, then there will be a penalty for not fulfilling the term of that rate. So for instance, it might be a penalty of 1, 2, 3, or even 5% of the total loan that you're borrowing. So you need to be careful on redemption penalties particularly. But I would say right now is the time when you should be preparing for rental interest rate rises, but also we've already seen massive increases in rents generally, and therefore one will offset the other by more than the difference, and that's going to be the rents. So the likely interest rate rises I suspect we will see will be in very, very small parts, in the same way that we've seen interest rates come down by 0.25% of the time. If they go up, then the warning signs will be there, because the first rise, in my view, will be a small one, probably as little as 0.25%, 0.5% as a maximum. And if you work out on your rate what such a rise might mean if you're on a variable rate, you'll probably find that it's not very significant. If you then look at that against what current rents are doing, then the current rents are more than compensating for the difference in the rates. So I hope that's helped to give you some confidence. As always, if you're thinking of buy to let, it's what we do. Come and speak to us. By the way, we're on a new platform as well, and a platform called Wisdom. They've said that we're a top mentor, so we're now doing chats on that as well. But don't forget, of course, most importantly, our podcast. We've got another version of that coming out tomorrow. If there's any topics you'd like us to cover, then do drop me an email, ken@jamesalexander.com. Phone me, 0208 679 8601, or just comment on the video. Please do like and share, because it helps us to know that you're there watching and this is all worth our while. Why do I have Homes Under the Hammer above my head? Well, many of you know we'll regularly appear on the program. And what we're finding at the moment is we're in the Homes Under the Hammer generation. What do I mean by that? Everybody, and I mean everybody that calls up, is looking for a property to stick their identity on. So properties that are done, ones that are ready, ones where people want to move in and unpack, less popular than they used to be. Now, what people want is a doer-upper. They often, as I've said many times, underestimate the cost of the works, and therefore they go in at a higher price for the ones that aren't done up. And this is why I always say, before you do any work on your property, call us around, because it might well be that your house needing work is worth more than the difference. And what I mean by that is, let's say you've got a 3-bedroom house worth $500,000, and if you did work to it, it would be worth theoretically 600,000. You might be surprised to note that that 600,000 isn't quite a fact, even though that might be the cost of the work. It might only increase its value by 50,000, and yet you're paying 100 just to do the work, just to sell for more money. So don't be a busy fool. Call us first. We're happy to do evaluation for you without obligation. I'd rather do it. So often now we're meeting people and they're saying, oh, wish I hadn't done all this work. Now you've said what it would have been worth before we started. You know, we're banging our head off a wall, and it's stressy as well, you know, especially if you live there going through all the works. By the same token, you know, if it's your family home, you're going to be staying there for some time. Well, fill your boots, enjoy, do what you want to do, slap your identity on it, but don't get caught up in the keeping up with the Joneses thing, because invariably it doesn't pay. So that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching. Lots of valuations today, I'm pleased to report, and lots of things going on, lots of move-ins, new rentals, not enough stock on rentals, not enough stock on sales. So if you're thinking of renting or selling your property, do give us a call. And if you want some general advice or a chat, you know we're always here for you. It's what we do. We've got your back. Thanks for watching. We're back tomorrow with another edition at Ken at 10. Until then, stay safe, look after your family and friends. Ciao.